real, then indeed the reason there's probably calcium carbonate is because you put the cloth was set into a tomb, and there was limestone, and the body's on one side and the limestone's on the other, and on the underside of the cloth there's limestone because that's what the body was laying on. That makes sense. We have all these, so you have all these contaminants on the non-image side. And what you see here, see these crystals? Those are calcium carbonate crystals on the non-image side. In these calcium crystal formations, we see traces of strontium and iron. Now, this is consistent with the aragonite limestone that we see in Jerusalem, because in Israel, you see lots of limestone, and these are the contaminants that you would expect to see there. This is an example of a rolling stone tomb. They literally had stones that rolled back then. All right, we have quite a number of them have been excavated, and these tombs are formed out of limestone. So here we see the body here, and notice if these are limestone, this if you go inside of a rolling stone tomb, that's what it looks like. You'll see these benches where the bodies were laying, and then this is what they do, and then the body would be laying like this, and then so on the non-image side would be facing this limestone bench. Limestone, what is limestone? Limestone is literally a geologically young form of marble. How do you turn limestone into marble? Any ideas? Yeah, exactly. Massive pressure. If you put limestone under pressure over time, limestone becomes marble. All right. Now, if you want to have bathroom fixtures of limestone, you can do that. Now, it's actually more expensive than marble. It's easier. It's harder to clean. Okay, but it's pretty fancy stuff if you can get it. But they have lots of aragonite limestone in Jerusalem. Now, when it comes to marble, you can tell where a marble comes from based on the contaminants within it. That tells you where it's from. Okay, it comes in different colors: white, yellow, pink, brown, gray, red, green, black. And the color of the limestone pretty much helps you identify where on earth it came from. For example, if you have white Connemara, that's going to be more likely to be from Italy. Okay, or no, I'm sorry, white. Did I say Connemara? I meant Carrara. Yeah, Carrara is white, and that tends to be of Italian origin. And Connemara is green, and that's going to be more in like green is going to be like Ireland, right? And so, but where the contaminants tell you where it's from. All right, now if you take a look at Israel, there are several places throughout Israel where we have rolling stone tombs. And there's a woman by the name of Eugenia Natalski, used to be a Carmelite nun. Actually, she still is, but she got her Ph.D. in archaeology from Notre Dame University. And part of her doctoral thesis was the uncovering of rolling stone tombs from the 1st century. And she discovered 54 of the 60 known 1st century Israeli burial tombs. That's quite a feat. She also took samples from each of the tombs. She took rock samples from each of the tombs and labeled where they came from. All right. Now that's very important. Why? Because Dr. Joseph Kolbeck, who's a research chemist at Hercules International, took her samples. He worked in conjunction with her, and he took a look at the electron microscopic energy dispersal patterns of the various limestone samples. And so you get a fingerprint, a molecular fingerprint for the limestone from these different geographic areas. Now, what Kolbeck noted before he looked at that was that if you take a look at the crystals on the back of the shroud and you compare the Cargoil immersion oil beta index with what you see in the Jerusalem limestone, you'll see that the indexes are the same. Okay, and so he provided the first evidence that this is actually Jerusalem limestone. And so then, when he took a look at the electron microscopic energy dispersal patterns for these same samples, it corroborated with his wet lab studies. Again, it looked like that not only were the crystals on the back of the shroud consistent with Israeli limestone, but Jerusalem limestone. Now, just to back himself up, to say, is this just me? Is this just my bias, or is this legitimately an objective reality here? What he did was he sent his results. He sent the samples and the shroud crystal samples to a colleague of his, Dr. Riccardo Levisetti, at the Enrico Fermi Institute at the University of Chicago. And what he did there was high-resolution ion microprobe analysis, which is basically another fancy electron microscopic analysis, only a little bit more sophisticated. And essentially, it confirmed Kolbeck's results with greater specificity. So what does that tell us? That tells us that the limestone on the back of the shroud has contaminants like a fingerprint that don't just fit Israeli limestone. It fits Jerusalem limestone. Jerusalem limestone. It's consistent with no other limestone in all of Israel except for Jerusalem limestone. So think about that. If this is a forger, he was ready for that high-resolution ion microprobe analysis. Now, pollen samples. There is so much work. When I put this particular presentation together, I apologize. These are old slides, and there's so much more data now. And so what I'm giving you is the old stuff. There is newer stuff and more mind-blowing stuff available. So you're listening to this. This is an old talk. There's a lot newer material available. So I'm going to say that I know that, but I don't have it in my new presentation yet. But if you doubt it, please look it up. The pollen sample distribution is amazing. Now, the first person to really take a serious look at these pollens was Dr. Max Free of the Zurich Police Scientific Laboratory. He's dead now, but his role was in a crime scene to figure out if the pollens on the perp's clothes match the pollens on the victim's clothes, and to put them in the same place at the same time. That was his job, to match pollen. But why is pollen sample analysis important in catching a criminal? Because if you have pollen distributions on your clothes, and that distribution only occurs in a certain area, that proves you were in that area. All right? Yes?
What's pollen? What is that?
Pollen?
Yeah.
When plants reproduce, like in the spring and so forth, they release pollen into the air, and then the pollen is like the sperm for plants that floats in the air, and it binds to the ovum of the other plant.
Okay,
And
so it gets on your clothes or what?
oh, yeah, it's in the air. It's in the air, and it floats. Yeah, it gets in the air. Now, pollen is produced by plants, and it gets in the air, and the bees play a big role in taking pollen from one plant to another and then fertilizing other plants. But what's happened is pollen is only produced by it only has a dispersal of a few hundred meters. And then, like, if a pollen is growing 2 miles away, it's unlikely that I'm going to get very much of it on me. I might get a little on me, but if there are no plants like that in my neighborhood, I'm not going to have very much. If I have a lot of that pollen on my clothes, that means I was right next to that plant. Now, if I have, if I'm in a forest and I have pollen from plant A, B, C, and D, and I have a lot of it, then then I had to have been in order for me to have a lot of it, I had to have been in that particular forest. Understand? Now, what Free found was that on the shroud, there are 6 strains of pollen that are only native to Israel. In fact, specific for the Jerusalem area. Okay? In fact, he went so far as to say, these are plants that were only found in the 1st century in Israel. He went way off. If you want to take a look at his results, it's published. Okay? But he specifically, these are this pollen distribution. The fact that you find this much pollen in this distribution on this cloth proves that this cloth was in Jerusalem at one time. So now we have 2 independent factors which put this cloth in Jerusalem and possibly in the 1st century. Okay? Yeah.
Pollen is very clingy.
It's very clingy. It is.
That's why I would.
Oh yeah. Now you can have.
It's not just gonna fall
Oh
off.
no. You can have winds and hurricanes and storms that will blow pollen from 20 miles away and it'll get on your clothes, but not very much of it, because it's going to blow everywhere, and by the time it gets to you, the concentration of that pollen won't be very high. For you to have a lot of it on means that plant was very close to you. So again, it puts you in a particular location. Does everyone understand that? Okay. All right. Professor Gilbert Reyes of the Ghent Institute of Textile Technology found that the 3-to-1 herringbone weave used in the manufacture of the shroud is consistent with 1st century Israeli manufacture. However, the 3-to-1 herringbone weave was used by multiple cultures throughout history, and so it doesn't prove that it was made in Israel. However, traces of cotton found in the weave does point to Middle Eastern manufacture. In Europe in the Middle Ages, they did not loom they didn't use the 3-to-1 herringbone weave for one thing, and they didn't use cotton in the Middle Ages, and so that points to the Middle East. So again, we have 1st century. We have something again consistent with 1st century Middle Eastern manufacture here. So when Luigi